Chapter 1 unfolds with highly skilled professional assassin, known as the Killer, stationed in a Parisian hotel room, awaiting his target. As he waits, he immerses himself in music, keenly observes the world outside his window, and even practices yoga. Venturing outside, he attempts to hack a motorcycle but fails, leading him to a nearby McDonald's for a meal. The assassin contacts his handler on day 5 of his mission. He's instructed to report back if he can't eliminate his target by the looming deadline. After the call, he immediately destroys his phone. After enjoying his meal on a park bench, he returns to his room to set up his sniper rifle. His work is interrupted by a mail delivery. Despite the nightfall and closing businesses, his target is nowhere to be found. He meticulously cleans up, leaving no evidence of his presence. On the 6th day, his target shows up. He prepares his sniper rifle and notices a woman. As he waits for his heart rate to stabilize, he sets the mood with music. He fires when his heartbeat reaches 65, but the woman moves and is hit instead. A second shot is thwarted as security closes the curtains. In a rapid sequence of events, he swiftly dismantles his sniper rifle, gathers his belongings, and makes a quick getaway on a hijacked motorcycle, successfully slipping past the police, then discards all the items associated with his mission. He reaches a bridge, ditches the motorcycle and his helmet, and changes his appearance in a public restroom before hailing a cab. At the airport, he disposes of his pistol and receives another call from his handler, which he ends by destroying the phone. He books a flight to Santo Domingo under the name Bunker for the next day. Back in his room, he prepares for any potential threats by rigging a noise device on his door and arming himself with a knife. The next day, he boards his flight and arrives safely at his next destination. Chapter 2 picks up in the Dominican Republic, where the killer arrives at his home after a long drive. He notices signs of intrusion, boot prints and discarded cigars. He quickly arms himself and rushes to investigate. Inside, he finds a scene of chaos, with blood on the floor and a knife nearby. He immediately heads to the hospital, where he finds his partner, Magdala, sedated in the ICU. With her brother Marcus. Marcus reveals that Magdala was tortured but managed to escape her attackers, who fled in a taxi. The killer promises Marcus that such an incident will not recur. When Magdala regains consciousness, she expresses her longing to see the killer, who urges her to rest. Back at his home, the killer unearths a hidden vault filled with weapons and begins his preparations. His investigation leads him to a green taxi, matching Marcus's description. Under the cover of night, he infiltrates the taxi garage, subdues the guard, and searches the computer for information. He discovers the name of the driver, Leo Rodriguez, and stages a robbery to cover his tracks. The next day, he sends a package under the alias Oscar Madison and successfully locates Leo. He boards Leo's taxi and subtly interrogates him about a recent affair, describing the woman as a Q-tip and the man as the brute. Leo unwittingly provides more information about the assassins. In a secluded area, the killer ends Leo's life, leaving his body in the taxi. Chapter 3 begins with the killer arriving in New Orleans. He hires a cab and rents a van, then heads to a storage unit to retrieve a gun, a new passport, and a license plate. He also purchases several items before driving to Hodge's office, where he disguises himself as a custodial worker. The arrival of a FedEx delivery provides the perfect distraction for him to evade the CCTV death latch lock. He uses a trash bin to carry a tool case and a gun into the office, surprising Dolores, the secretary. He confiscates her phone and laptop and enters Hodge's room. The killer instructs Dolores to tie up Hodge and then herself in the bathroom. He proceeds to destroy the laptops and tortures Hodge with a nail gun to extract information about the hitmen. However, Hodge dies quicker than anticipated. Dolores negotiates for a quick, non-suspicious death in exchange for the names of the hitmen, ensuring her children can claim her life insurance. The killer loads Hodge's body along with the evidence in the bin as they exit the building. Dolores then leads the killer to her house. Despite her attempts to free herself, she remains tied up. The killer retrieves the files he needs, as directed by Dolores. After obtaining the information, he ends her life swiftly. He meticulously cleans the van before returning it to the rental service. Chapter 4 takes the killer to St. Petersburg, Florida, where he identifies the brute by his distinctive limp. Accompanied by 2 men, the brute leads the killer on a chase that ends at a casino. The killer patiently waits in his car, following them back to the brute's home later that night. After drugging the pit bull guarding the house, the killer stealthily enters, armed with a gun and intent on eliminating the brute. However, the brute surprises him, disarming him and landing several heavy punches. The killer manages to evade further attacks and momentarily subdues the brute, but he breaks free and retrieves a gun. In the ensuing chaos, the killer finds refuge in a room, recovers his gun, and ultimately kills the brute. This awakens the drugged pit bull, which chases the killer. He narrowly escapes, locking the gate just in time to prevent the dog from attacking him. Before leaving, he throws a Molotov cocktail into the house, setting it ablaze. Chapter 5 sees the killer journeying to Beacon, New York. Upon exiting the train station, he rents a car and heads towards his next target, the expert. He parks nearby and patiently waits for her to appear. As night falls, he identifies her based on Leo's description of her as a Q-tip. He follows her to a restaurant and, after observing her seating choice, he joins her and swiftly disarms her, leaving her momentarily speechless. A waiter approaches, and the expert orders a whiskey. As she sips her drink, she explains her side of the story, insisting that she didn't want to involve Magdala. The killer listens quietly, taking a shot of whiskey himself. He then leads the expert to a park. When she stumbles and asks for his help, he shoots her in the head instead, not trusting her. As he moves her body, he discovers a concealed knife. Chapter 6 The killer journeys to Chicago, where the client, billionaire venture capitalist Henderson Clay Claiborne, resides in a luxurious penthouse. The killer attempts to enter the penthouse through a parking garage, but finds the door locked. He exits the building and orders a fob copier from Amazon. He tracks Clay to Balaquinox, a local gym, and registers himself as a member. He then transfers all his finances to the Dominican Republic under the alias Jefferson, and purchases a gun from an unlicensed dealer. The next day, he picks up his Amazon parcel. Upon successfully entering Balaquinox, he steals a key from a janitor and waits for Claiborne to leave his locker. He then obtains Claiborne's key card and clones it. Using the clone card, he gains access to the building, successfully evading security. The killer confronts Clay at gunpoint in his penthouse. Clay, initially clueless, recognizes the killer when shown a card. Clay admits that he hired a hitman to scrub the trail but had no personal issue with the killer. The killer spares Clay, but warns him of a slow death if he ever retaliates. Back in the Dominican Republic, the killer serves coffee to Magdala, who is still recovering.